Now we'll take a look at building A-2. The front and right or left elevations, depending on which one you did. You can see we have two separate viewports. Each of these is set to 1/4 inch. We're also using the drawing label in the paper space with the assigned number, title, and scale. For the sheet information here, what you'll want to do is simply indicate the scale and the title for the drawing. So let's take a look at how we'll approach this. Here we are. The A1 is completed. I'm going to use the C-size seed layout here. If I right-click, I'll use mover copy, select move to end, create a copy, and click OK. You can see it here at the end. Click on it, then double-click and rename it. So here again, we're going to use our viewport layer. What we're going to do slightly differently, and I'll show you what we could do a variety of ways, is to lay out the viewports. We need to consider the space available in the sheet as much as the scale that we're going to use for each of the viewports. We want to make sure that the viewport is large enough that we capture all of the information for the target scale. But we also want to make sure that we arrange those viewports on the sheet so that we have spacing to show any layout or title block information, such as the drawing labels that we show here. Okay? On the one side, this is where we could include lists, legends, or other schedules if we need to. Also consider if you have a binding in a large sheet set. So there's all these factors to consider when you're laying out your elevation views. In addition, know that the way that we constructed this is it's projected from the model. So we're going to have to use Dview and the UCS rotation. So one way, an easy way that we could set up our viewports is simply use MV and just sort of create a viewport just like that. Okay. Once we show the view for this viewport, then we could actually simply copy the viewport and bring it down into our layout to position it. Another way that we could actually do this is to be very precise in determining how many viewports we create at one time and the actual spacing between the viewports. The command that we can use to do that is MV setup. So since we already showed MView, let's take a look at MV setup. If you type MV, it should pop right up. You'll also see right above it MView, right? So if I select MV setup and enter, then take a look at your command line for the options. What you're trying to do here is create multiple viewports. So if you just click on create or type C and enter again, you'll see the default is to create viewports, and then you'll get this option down here, available layout options. You'll want to use option 3, array of viewports. Enter. Now, what you're doing here in the next couple steps is you're going to define the total area where all of the viewports are going to go, and you're going to specify the spacing between them. This would make sense if we were doing like 4 or more viewports. For 2, it doesn't really matter, but it's a great opportunity to show you how to use the command. So here's the first corner where I want to see both of the viewports. Here, remember, I want to leave enough room below for my label. Here's the other corner that will define the two viewports. Now you'll see it asks how many viewports in the X direction, right? We only want 1. And then in the Y direction, we want 2. Now this is where you can specify the numeric distance between both of them, right? Here it says distance between viewports in Y direction. This is where you want to have at least, what, about an inch, inch and a half, maybe 2 inches? Let's see. Let's put 2 inches there and hit enter. There you go. So I've got hit enter to exit again, and then you can see here's one viewport and the other viewport. They're both equally sized and spaced 2 inches apart. Now, how to proceed, right? Well, what I would recommend is, since we're going to be working with layer status, right, always return to layer 0. from the very beginning, layer 0 is just a placeholder. So literally, there should be nothing on layer 0, right? Everything has its own place, its own layer. So, starting first with this top viewport, okay? If I double click here, you can see I can set the scale. First, set it to 1/4 inch, and then use, again, your pan tool here to pan around to make sure you can see the entire drawing, right? That represents your elevation. Now, here's what you could do. You can see it's a little bit tight right here in this corner here, but here's what I'll do. I'll switch to paper and zoom in to the viewport so I can see better, right? And then once again, double click. I can still, right, since I haven't locked it, I can still pan it around, move it around, and make sure I have everything within the viewport. So since I have the scale, I have the right orientation, everything is visible, I can lock it now, and now I can focus on what I need to freeze, right? So you'll want to zoom in there, and again, when you use this button, this command, freeze in the layout model, what you're doing is, whatever you select, you're only freezing for that viewport. This information still remains available in all the other viewports. So basically, I'm just getting rid of a lot of detail here that I used earlier. Okay, and just to reveal, right, what would be my walls, my columns, my beams. I've got some hatching there. I've got some annotations indicating what the finishes and features are. I've got some linear dimensions. These are in model as well. I think I got something extra there. Not really sure what that is. That probably should be on one of my elevation layers. So this is where you'll start to see, right? Did you put everything on the right layer? Also, make sure you include your slope symbol. Okay? Now, once I've done that for one view, return to the paper, just double click outside of that viewport, and you can do the same thing here. Now notice this, right? Think about this. When I created the viewport with MView, right, MV, I could work with one viewport and then I could simply copy it. And there's an advantage to that, rather than doing it as I did right now with MV setup. Just the same, there's a drawback to it, right? I used MV setup so I could get the same size viewport spaced numerically some distance apart. But in this viewport, I already set all my layer status, right? Here, I have to do it all over again. So look at this. This is how I'm going to reuse this viewport. Okay, it's spaced and sized the way I want it. So look at what I'm going to do here. I'm just going to stretch it a little bit so I can select it later. And I'll simply take this viewport, right, that I've already adjusted, use copy selection, and put it right on top of that one. Right? Now select the previous one and delete it. Basically, I have two similar views, right? The same view. Well, why did I do that, right? I already set the layers here. I already set the layer status. And what I could do now is simply unlock it, and even the scale is already set, right? Now the only thing I have to do is, if you'll notice over here, here's the actual drawing I want to see. But all the layer information is already set. So the only thing I need to do is use dynamic view. Now this is the east view, which I have to rotate clockwise. Clockwise is always negative angle. So here I'll do DV, enter, enter, TW for the twist option, enter, enter the actual value, which is going to be -90, enter, and enter again. Now you should see the proper rotation. If you pay attention here to the UCS, you'll notice it's on its side, and if I wanted to include annotations as I've done here for the south, I need to make those look right side up. So in order to do that, also change the UCS. So type UCS, enter, and use V for the view option. And now you'll see that UCS right side up. You'll notice as I switch to this viewport, look at that. Each viewport will retain its own dynamic view and UCS. Okay, so here now all I have to do is finish up by aligning the view, okay, making sure I have the right scale, locking the view, and returning to the paper. Now I'm ready to go ahead and update my information block and also include my drawing labels. Now for that, you want to make sure that you have your symbols file open. Okay? In the paper space is where you'll find that drawing label. Simply Control-C, copy, and paste it into the paper here. Once you have one copy, okay, you can make another. So here what you'll do is just simply double click and adjust your information here. This is going to be our south elevation. And we'll set the scale 1/4 inch. Oops. Alright. And then all we need to do here is look at this. Select it, right click, use copy selection. Now I want it to be consistent, right, with the other viewport. So use a base point on the viewport to the same base point on the other viewport, and then escape. And then you can simply double click. It's a block, that labels a block with attributes. And you'll notice that because it's a block with attributes, it maintains the text options, the justification, and text styles. So now that I have this ready, now I can freeze all viewports. Okay, and make sure you update your information block. Here's A-2 and A-1, right? Now, I can't see my schedule, and I bet you it's because I did not put it on the correct layer. Ta-da! Right, so there you go. Another reason, double check your layers, right? So this information, whatever you put into the paper, you should look into your layers. You should see TB notes. You may see note, something like that, or maybe even PS notes, paper space notes. You could use either one. I'm going to use TB notes here. Okay, and that'll correspond to a layer color and a line weight. So once again, let's freeze the viewports. That doesn't look good. Let me double check that again. Didn't we put it on the right layer? And let's double check here the properties, right? Yeah, okay. Should all be in the right layer. And let's just pretend it's right, okay? And so the next thing we want to do is take a look at publishing. Let's do that in the next video.